I'm not sure how long this is going to be. I don't know what I'm going to call this series, but I've been doing some daily sketches for about 3 months now. And occasionally I have other ideas. And then there was a time when I was doing my blog posts on rantathon.wordpress.com. I should actually just purchase that rantathon domain. But I've been doing that as well. For some time, I was doing covers. And then, as some of you might have know, who are my few 500 or so subscribers here on the Dying Live on YouTube and then other platforms, occasionally I'll do a video and then I'll do a drawing, a speed drawing going on with it. Now I think I'm going to do a thing where it's just, I come up with an idea in a short, kind of shorty sort of thing and do a drawing that goes along with it and just talk about the thing for the while I'm talking, while the speed drawing is going on the screen. So if you're watching the video version of this, there is going to be speed drawing. My general thought of this was, it came to me a few nights ago when I had a really good night just thinking about all the positive things that were going on in my life, the potential and things like that. And I know I've left a lot of things back, getting middle aged, being single, not having kids, but having nephews, and just thinking about the positivity. I've never been against the idea of having kids. Kids are awesome. Kids are cool. I've liked kids. Kids seem to like me well enough. Yes, I know the challenges of having them, but I just started thinking just in general of how come in society there's this movement of nihilism. There's this nihilistic kind of tendency, and not just in feminism movements like that, which is more on the politically left, where they're just like, we don't want kids anymore. Kids are not worth having. They destroy our bodies. They destroy our lives. We want to live in this sort of way. And then on the right, you have like the manosphere, MGTOW type of thing where it shows up in that kind of way as well. People say, oh, incels, we're involuntarily celibate. The women are so, it's too dangerous. I can't find a nice woman who can have this. Some practicalities of it where it's like the economy's kind of messed up. Like it's very hard to get a job. It's good enough to actually have support a family in this sort of way that you think you want to support them. And there's other issues out there, and the women have certain gripes that are correct in certain ways. The men have certain gripes that are correct, the right, left. There's reasons to be against certain ideas. There's reasons to have complaints. There's reasons to think things could be improved. Some people, I think, fallaciously look to the past and think it was so much better in the past. And that could be some mythologizing of how things were. Remember, we don't necessarily have the sort of historical catalog of the past that we live in today. I don't know what social media would have shown in the past in the 50s. Let's say that Ma Pa Cleaver, I think it's Ma Pa Cleaver or something like that, the white picket fence type of thing. Yes, there's some positive things like with the currency, with the non-inflated money in the United States of America, you were able to afford a pretty decent house in a pretty decent neighborhood and support your wife and few kids with one job. Now with inflation, if you're in a similar neighborhood, you probably can't do the same thing in a similar home. But do you have to be in the similar neighborhood? And there's some friends that I met when I was in New York City. They were younger. They found each other, got married, moved, I think, to PA, Pennsylvania or something, smaller town area, and they're living that life because they decided to move. Yes, I also know there's issues in the smaller towns. There's a lot of reasons, a lot of different things out there that I do agree are actual complaints, but I still think if you also look back to the past instead of that mythologizing of, oh, it was so much better, and it was in certain ways, but it was also so much worse. World wars were not that long ago. And forget just the world wars. There's other places outside of the United States of America, urban areas, which this is happening the most of the not wanting kids, the nihilist sort of movements and ideas out there. And there's other places in the world living in so much worse objective conditions than you are, but they're still having kids. There's Americans in the other places, in those places you are, that are still having kids. There's times in the recent past that were so much worse, like Black people, I don't want to bring a child into this wife because it's critical to the big race theory and things like that. But literally 60 years ago, it was like civil rights movement and kids were still being born. Black families were, in America were still having kids. There's this hate on Asian, the hate on the Jews. Like, there's so many things you can say are bad now, and I'm not saying they're not. What I am saying is things have been and are a lot worse for people alive today and in the recent past, let alone the long historical times. And people still manage to have kids. There might be slight alterations to the dream or the imagination that you had. And this is one of my ongoing issues with the United States of America. The American dream is false. You can't live life on dreams. You can seek for it, can give you some guidances for things to do, some hopes, but you got to face the American reality. And I think there's certain aspects of the United States of America, of mostly developed countries, that have set up falsehoods, these fictions, these mythological times in the present. And I guess with America, there could be a thing where it's like kind of one of the post mythological countries where it was created by humans, yet there was still an effect of like mythologizing what it is today, what people can hope to have in the United States of America in the current timeline, in current day, compared to like the realities that I think a lot of other people in the world face. And of course, some Americans face that too. So with this one, I'm going to read you guys some AI things right now. What do you guys think? Have you guys noticed this, first of all, guys, gals, and everybody else in between? Have you noticed that there is this nihilist sort of movement that in the ethos, in this social, social sphere, infosphere? I don't know. Okay, so I'm just going to read these from Google. I just typed them in Google. I'll read some from Google, then I'll go to Brave browser and see what's there. So there's going to be an AI overview at the top. I might just skim over that. But the top entry is Wikipedia for nihilism. Then the questions are, what is a nihilist person like? Nihilist personality traits revolve around the core belief that life lacks inherent meaning, purpose, or objective value. Individuals with these traits often exhibit radical skepticism, extreme pessimism, and an apathy towards traditional societal moral structures. While sometimes linked to emotional despair, these traits can also manifest as liberating. Now, I guess you can be like, yeah, please, nothing so I can do anything. Nothing I do matters. And with this kind of thing, you know that one saying, there are no atheists in a foxhole? People say like, okay, in actuality, if you are an atheist, if you put in a life or death situation, you will all of a sudden find some higher being or believe in some, reach out to some higher existence to get you out of that situation. Now, of course, there's the whole inverse of like, if you kind of wonder if there was a higher being, would they have put me in this situation to begin with? Or is some kind of punishment for me not believing in that higher being? And then if this is a punishment, would they actually like listen to me if I cried out, if they know I'm just kind of put in this situation? Do I want to pray to this being if that's kind of the equation that they, oh, you don't believe in me? I'm going to put you in a life or death situation so you can believe in me type. Yeah, anyway, so there's all that. But aside from that, I think it's something where it got me thinking with this one on the nihilism, where are there any true nihilists? Because if you truly are a nihilist, wouldn't you kind of check out yourself? Or is it a situation, if things have no meaning, you get to a point where you want to take other people down or destroy things with you? But then if it's no meaning, then even your attempts to destroy, so maybe even your attempts to check out would not have any meaning, and you can kind of get into that kind of position where you're just there. So they say here, and this is again the first question that people ask, two approaches to nihilistic traits. People who embody these traits generally fall into one or two mindsets. One, often debated in philosophical and psychological circles. One, the passive, pessimistic mindset. This approach is rooted in despair. When individuals realize there is no objective meaning to life, they may feel a sense of hopelessness, emptiness, and depression. They might conclude that because nothing matters, effort is pointless. So again, in this point, maybe even like the effort to check out is pointless. So you don't do that either. You just kind of exist and go along with existence, with just being there, with nothingness, so that life exists, I guess. The active, liberating mindset. Many individuals with nihilistic traits view the lack of inherent meaning as not as a tragedy, but as a blank slate. They adopt an attitude that since nothing matters objectively, they're completely free to invent their own personal meaning, values, and purpose. I strongly disagree with this. I think there are certain preferable actions. There's virtues, there's values out there in the world that can be universally applied. And somebody that has done, I think, a pretty good job at it, that I can't find too many holes in it, is Universally Preferable Behavior by Stéphane Molyneux. It's like a secular case for ethics. And this is also aligned with our shared belief in the value of the non-aggression principle, the zero aggression principle, where you don't actually initiate the use of force against people. You can defend yourself, but you shouldn't initiate the use of force. So one of the examples with stealing here is something like stealing cannot be universally preferable behavior. Because if I have, let's say, a cup, I can't want you to steal the cup from me because you will actually be doing something I want. Stealing by definition is doing something against, is possessing somebody, taking possession of something against the rightful owner's desires. So that can't be universally applied. But on the inverse, the respect of private property rights. Like somebody can own something and you respect that they get to keep that thing unless they give it away. I own my cup unless I give my cup away. That can be universally applied. So what say you? What are your thoughts on nihilism? Are you a nihilist? Have you ever been nihilistic? Do you know any nihilistic people? Let me know what you think about that. And yeah, just check it out. Just go to a browser and type it in and see what comes up. So what is nihilism is another one. Explain like I'm five on the Reddit. The most dangerous idea in history, nihilism for the videos. Why nihilism is taking over modern society. Other people are definitely seeing that. Nihilism isn't what you think. Again, from Aperture, the same one. Definitions. Designing the mind, a tour of nihilism, existentialism, and absurdism. How to find the sunny side of nihilism. Nihilism, history, philosophy, theories. On the origin and development of the term nihilism. That's the first page of Google. Now let's go over to natalism and see what they say there. Wait, what was the first one? Let me actually read the initial description. I think, yeah, okay, the initial description for nihilism on the Google page that I typed in nihilism on is pretty much similar to the question that I asked in what is nihilism, that question, the answer there. And they said the key forms of nihilism was, I'll add this, is existential nihilism, the most common form, which asserts that life has no inherent purpose. It posts that humans are insignificant in the grand scale of the universe. Moral ethical nihilism, the belief that nothing is objectively moral or immoral. It rejects the existence of absolute ethical values and argues that right and wrong are merely human constructs. Now that one I can kind of see, but then even though human beings are the only sentient beings that we know of right now, so even if they are human constructs, they're still valuable. There's still some import to them. It doesn't have to exist outside of us. And yeah, some things, I think life in general begets life in that kind of sense, can get more philosophical and deep into that. But yeah, let me know on that one. Do you think just because something is a human construct that somehow devalues it? But what if we are the first and only sentient beings or the last sentient beings? We have the ability to seek meaning. We're meaning creating beings, machines, so we can still value the meaning that we create in those things. Okay. Next one is epistemological nihilism, a form of extreme skepticism which claims that knowledge is either impossible to attain or does not exist at all. And then next we have cosmic nihilism, the perspective that the universe is entirely indifferent to human beings and that even meanings created by humans, such as love or society, are ultimately meaningless illusions. Now, I guess that goes to the other thing, but again, even if we are the only beings, we still are beings. We're still here. We're still being at the time being. And that has some value in and of itself. Even if we're just the single flash in the entire existence of the universe and there's never going to be any life, it's going to go to heat death or constrict again and blow up again, whatever you want to believe in it. It's still, I still think there's value. The fact that we can even have this conversation, the fact that you even alive enough to click this and listen to this wherever you found it, that's something. There is some value in that. Even if it is if you put it in context of the entire universe, it might not mean much, but it still meant something. There's people's lives who existed who we never heard of, like our great ancestors may have done things and we never actually know anything about their lives. Or somebody might have helped them, might have done a small good thing for them, and they might have been like, oh, that's this tiny thing, it didn't mean anything. But because this compatriot or random being that our great ancestor did had happened to them led to you being alive today, that is valuable enough in its own way. Okay, so enough with the nihilism on that page right there. And then now let's go to natalism. What does it say? Natalism is a cultural, political, and philosophical belief system that promotes human reproduction, rooted in the premise that human life and population growth are positive. Natalist perspectives advocate for family expansion to combat declining global birth rates and to support long-term societal and economical stability. Now with this one, let's go. Just that first one, this also ties in a bit to the people who were like, we're going to have too many people in the world. That was, I think, sensationalist. And then now these people are like, we're going to have too few people in the world. That's also now sensationalist on the other hand. There's no like set number of people that must be reproduced. There's no set cultures that have to be maintained by a certain number of people. Like, I don't believe in that kind of thing. We can pass on ideas. We can share thoughts. We can maintain each other in greater numbers than we have now or far fewer numbers than we have now. That one I'm not too concerned about. If anything, I think some of the baby boom, it's going to call the baby boom generation, some of this massive increases in reproduction in numbers might be in part due to state governments going all over the place and mucking up resources and mutating the incentives and creating messed up signals that they're incentivizing and signaling people to do certain behaviors that are not really appropriate to the environment and reality that we live in. And I think we're probably going to have a situation where, let me check, what's our population right now? Human population today. Human population today. I remember going to sometime back, I watched some documentary. I'm probably not going to remember it enough to link this. You can find it somewhere on my Rent-On blog. This about like the population bomb or something like that. And right now, human population is 8.2 to 8.3 billion. And this person made a pretty good case of how the world would probably just keep increasing. And then once we have certain trends, certain better systems of sharing resources around the world, we'd even out to about like 11 million. That's what this person thought would make sense when you factor in like people not dying from like random diseases that we can help, not having these massive wars, or not having certain displacements, dealing with certain natural disasters in a certain way. So you just have an even thing where like majority of the people that are born actually stand the chance to live to a good old adulthood into their 80s and stuff like that. Then there'd be a leveling out of populations at about 11 billion. That seemed to make sense in what the person said. And I kind of think, I haven't heard too many cases that are off that, but I don't think we're going to get to the point where just like, because we're not natalists, we're going to drop down. The nihilism, what I'm talking about, is not going to get us down into like the 5 or so billions unless like we have a meteorite or asteroid hit the Earth or some other really horrible like wiping out of humanity sort of thing. I think would have to happen for that. Okay, and for some people, they're like that's not out of the question. I think it's not that there's not a high chance that's going to happen. Okay, so back to the natalism thing. Discussions around natalism generally span several dimensions, presenting different frameworks and priorities. First one, societal and economic strategy. Many governments and economists promote pro-natalist policies such as tax incentives, subsidized childcare, and extended parental leave to counteract aging populations and shrinking workforces. Now, this one, there's those Trump accounts. I saw like Nicki Minaj, just saw a photo of Nicki Minaj in the White House with it, and I steadily get surprised how, especially women, how there are some full-on adult females that are just tiny human beings. One of my really good friends is a very tiny human being. I haven't seen her tonight. She lives in the States right now. But like occasionally you just see a picture of somebody, you're like, wow, you just exist your whole life that size? That's crazy. Like she's a tiny person. But so anyway, the Trump account thing is this whole thing where I think the US government does a thing where if you're born, you apply for this thing and then you put a certain amount of money is put into an account for your child, and then it keeps maturing until they're 18 or something. And the government like matches the amount that's put in every year, like 1,000 something every year. And it was done by, I don't want to say, I think the people on Price Club or Costco or Walmart. It wasn't Walmart people. It was some wealthy family that is actually mainly doing this, and many other Americans are doing it. So that aspect of people doing a charity in that kind of sense, I'm not against that. But now, if there's going to be taxation anyway, we're not going to stop that anywhere soon. I think if it's put towards this and it's a situation where it's like you have the money, and that's kind of a positive thing versus the current system, which has led to some of these nihilistic or some of these challenges that I said were accurate in the start from men and women talking about the cost it is to actually reproduce and have kids and have a family in the sense that they wanted, where kids are being put into school. You said you have to be in for a 4-year degree. You have to do some post-grad sometimes. So you've been in educational system, in the schooling indoctrination complex until you're in your mid-20s, and you come out with debts. And then due to certain protections of certain systems, certain businesses being propped up, not having correct signals from the actual market because of government involvement and regulations, people are staying in jobs way too long, or certain jobs that should have kind of dissolved by themselves because they're not competitive, and free those resources up to newer things and then the people who are in the schools are not educating people in the right, correct kind of way because they don't really get graded on how well the people do after they leave. It's just about how long do we keep the people in there and credentialize them, so they're not coming up with the right sorts of skills to actually be prepared for any sort of market that's out there. So you have all these situations, you're coming out with debt. So if you have this of the inverse, right, instead of coming out with debt, you're actually coming out with like at least it's being paid for by this way. But then now it's like okay, if it's just taxation, they're taxing you, they're putting it in, and then they already tax people to put you in the school. And when you get out of the school, you get like FAFSA, you get like financial aid or subsidized degrees from the tax money you get in school, and then you pay for that school with the money that was also put in your account from taxation. But regardless, I think this is a healthier way, a preferable way to a lot of the way taxes are used. And then the weird thing, and maybe not so bad because there's a lower number of this sort of regressive leftists not actually having kids, but you have some people who are just spiting their kids and saying, I'm not going to partake in this, not because they have a general objection to taxation, to monies being taken away from other people and given to other people in that kind of sense, but because Trump is doing it. Because it's called the Trump account, so I'm not going to do it. Like, come on, dude, just put that aside. It's for your kid. Trump's going to be well and gone by the time your kid's actually benefiting in any sort of way by potentially having that money. Or if they feel it's not a thing that they want, they can give it to actual charities or some. But it's kind of crazy that some people are just opting out off of that kind of, I dislike Trump so much that even if he's doing something that could benefit my children, I'm not going to do that. Okay. Next one. Ideological and cultural movements. Proponents of this philosophy emphasize the moral and existential value of having children, sometimes arguing that civilization's collapse or stagnation is imminent without population growth. Again, I'm not on that, but I do kind of understand, like, if you value life enough to still be with us, to still be alive, there's got to be a part of you that can also relate that, hey, that is preferential than not existing. So if you have the ability to kind of change some things around, limit some things that you have, adjust some things, test some new things out, you could probably put yourself in a situation that would overcome some of the major questions you have about possibly being a parent. And there's peaceful parenting, there's so many resources and ways to educate your children, move to different places, you can travel, you can get different communities of people that would help you in different ways. Yes, some people may not be close to their immediate family, but you can make relationships. And there's just way more ways to be connected to people for y'all to just be like giving up, like, I'm never going to have kids. Oh, I'm not good enough to have kids. I can't do this with kids. Don't think about it in that way. Look at ways to actually say yes to life. Just say yes. Find ways to actually bring more life in a way, in your own way. And some of this is also just like, the weird part about it is like, I know quite a few people who say they're in a happy relationship with somebody, and they're like, I still don't want to have kids. That one I don't necessarily understand. Like, if you think this human being is such an awesome person in their existence as is, why would you not want to do the most awesome thing of creating another person and then seeing how this awesome human being contributes genetically to this person, but more importantly for humans, mentally, socially, spiritually, in that kind of sense? Like, what do they impart onto this person? You bring another human being to this life that gets to experience this amazing being that you're with. That's the part I don't necessarily understand. So if y'all are in those kind of relationships, what is your argumentation for it? Let me know in the comments, or if you've talked to people, or if you can just think it through, that can make kind of sense why some people are that way, where it's not just like simple thing like, oh, we can't afford it. That one I can understand, and I can, like, you can move to certain places, but some people can't do that. So I understand those kind of limitations. But the people who are like, we are financially stable. I really love my partner. I love my wife. I love my husband. We have friends. Yeah, we're in a solid sort of situation, but we just don't want to have kids. Is it like it's gonna hurt my body? Like, that's the part I don't really understand. Like, did you not have a good childhood? So you're like, you don't want your kids to have something that you think you wouldn't be able to improve on what you had. Those are the things that I'm not quite sure with that one. But yeah, it's not a population growth thing. I think it'll be okay. You can still support other people's children living in good ways. You have your nieces, nephews, that kind of ways of that kind of thing, where your genetics are still, there's a genetic urge in there, most definitely, that's in there. And maybe some people are kind of divorced from that because we've kind of gotten high level sentience and thinking where we can have a connection to other people that are not directly blood related. And that's something also, relatives, you don't get to pick your relatives. That's genetic. You're born into there. But family, you can make family. So there's a possibility that you can truly feel like I have family members who might not be my genes, but I can impart enough about who I am as a human being and support these people in a certain way, or I see that's value and I see that's something that I value in a way and I can support someone that way. So I understand there are other ways where somebody is not necessarily against children in and themselves as a concept, but they're just like, it's not for me personally, but they still support that in a kind of way. So there is that. Like I said, I don't understand being a nihilist. Like, you don't have to be a natalist, but I don't understand just being a nihilist in this current timeline in that kind of way. Okay, next section here, criticism and counter arguments. Critics often debate the movement's environmental implications or point out that certain pronatalist rhetoric attempts to roll back women's workforce participation and autonomy. Conversely, antinatalism represents opposing philosophical stance, arguing that bringing new life into a world filled with suffering is morally wrong. Again, besides having like the biggest states ever, and I think there is some subconscious thing, even though people don't recognize and see the state as the predator to the body politic that I see it with my anarcho-capitalist leaning, and people are more libertarian in that kind of sense. I think people are smart enough to kind of have a subconscious clue that the state is a sort of parasite predator that's increasingly omnipresent and mucking things up, even though we might have been indoctrinated or nurtured to not come out and recognize it. So there might be a general underlying fight or flight sort of mentality that we're feeling we're constantly being predated on, so we don't really feel we can have the children in that kind of way. I think there is that in there with like that suffering. It's not necessarily suffering, but it's like the threat. And then I also have another video, it's one of my earlier concepts, that the world is safer today, but it feels more dangerous because of now the communication again. Like I said, in the past, there was a mythologizing of the white picket fence, but we weren't seeing what that actually was like inside the doors of that. We remember it in that sort of way. Some people remember that sort of way, but they don't see like the bad other aspects of it, the day-to-day things that were hard and tough and the suffering is going on. This is my analogy, quick analogy. It's like, okay, in the past, if you lived in a neighborhood of 10 houses in like 100 square mile area, and there was a situation where 5 of the houses that year were robbed, you moving around, you might actually meet 1 or 2 of your neighbors over that time for whatever reason, and then you might hear an account from one of those neighbors about their houses being robbed. That's a 50% chance that you were in the house. Okay, not 50%, because if you were not the robbed ones, then it's like 4 people were not robbed and 5 were not robbed. So whatever the math and that kind of thing is. But regardless, so let's say you had a 50-50 chance to actually meet somebody whose house was robbed. You'd hear from one of those people. There's a chance you meet any of them. You could meet 4 of your neighbors and not have anyone be robbed. And even though half the people were robbed, so that whole year you could just have the mentality like, hey, nobody's been robbed, or only half, like, yeah, so nobody's been robbed, or there's 10 houses and you only hear from one person and they tell you like sometime after it's happened, they don't tell you the details of what happened. So you all of a sudden you're like, oh yeah, okay, somebody's been robbed. So you might be thinking like the chance of you getting robbed not that high, even though it was like 50%, it was almost your house being robbed that year. But your mentality, your remembrance of that time might have been, it's pretty safe. Now you move on to the present, and maybe there's 100 houses in that same area, and 10 houses get robbed. So now that's 10% of the houses getting robbed that year. But because of modern media, modern communication, the news, every house that's robbed, you're getting instant coverage of it. You're seeing the video of inside the house. You're hearing the people who just got robbed crying right after. They continue being reported. The next house gets robbed. They remind you again the previous house got robbed. The next house gets robbed. You're reminded again of the previous 2 houses getting robbed. You're constantly being bombarded by people. Oh, you remember these houses are robbed, so you need to improve your security, you improve your insurance, you improve your this and this. So like right at that point, it's 10% of the houses were robbed. So the chances of you being robbed are not that as high as they were in the past. But you hear the grimy details as it's fresh, and you're constantly reminded of that being robbed. So you might feel it's actually more dangerous. You might feel that people in that 100 square meter area are suffering more, even though their homes are better, their homes are safer, the kids are happier, the kids are better fed. Like there's more technology, there's more comforts in those houses, and all that stuff could be better in current timeline. But because of the perception, because of the coverage, because of the information that you're getting, you might think there's more suffering, even though there actually isn't. So that's my whole spiel on that. Like to go towards like, don't be nihilistic on that as an aspect. And some of that's the same thing with some of these movements, like the feminism and that kind of thing, where it's like you're hearing every single horrible thing that happened to women, which is a horrible situation to be in. On the other MGTOW side, you're hearing every single horrible case of a woman having like the paternity fraud type of thing, or just messing someone up, or just, you're hearing every single situation like that, when majority of men are not like that. The vast majority of men are not like that. The vast majority of women are not like that. But you got to ask yourself, what is it about your friend sphere, the people you know, your acquaintances, the information you're partaking, that it seems like most people are like that? Because they're not that way. And workforce participation and autonomy. again, with some of these things, workforce participation, like the most amazing thing to do, I think, would be a mother, just in general, just to you grow another life, another human being in your body, and that the human being comes out and relies on you, and you grow an entire human, an entire consciousness that could possibly be the first consciousnesses in the universe, that could possibly be the only or the last ones. Like, yeah, there's a few things that you might be able to achieve human construct wise better than the potential of that, but I don't necessarily know what is. And I also understand I'm saying this, my middle-aged self, single self, childless. I'm taking steps towards rectifying that kind of situation. Yeah. Anyway, so let's continue this. So specific examples of pronatalist politics in different countries are in there. You can explore those things. So let me just go through the actual thing as we get towards the end of this video that has gone up to like 30 minutes now. Wow. Okay, so let's see. This is kind of normal for me just to rant on. It's rant-a-ton, so ranting a ton. Here we go. So natalism, that's Wikipedia is the first one. EBSCO, natalism, the definition, Cambridge Dictionary there. What is natalism? Let's discuss from Reddit. Natalism definition, the rise of pronatalism, why Musk, Vance, and the right. This is another thing, it's very right-coded. And this is a weird type of thing of people on the left who are saying, it's like, babies are right-coded? Is it because like the abortion type of thing is more left-coded? Like the cruelty of natalism, this is from Psychology Today. Cruelty of natalism is essentially the promotion of childbearing. It's when having the children is the norm. Don't have kids, you're not normal. Okay, I might read that as a separate article, but yeah. Non-natalism, pronatalism is not enough from the Heritage Foundation. So I guess they're going kind of in more gangster on it. Pronatalism movement against the decline in births is making headlines. Now they're the kind of sort who are pushing out the thing like, oh, it's like society's going to die unless we have more kids. And yes, there is some coding like we need like more white babies, hot babies. White people need to have more babies. And yeah, white people are a minority in the world. When you talk about just pure 100% when white people are both parents and grandparents are both like European stock, more than, yeah, you can say like that's 7%, 8% of the population globally. So they are kind of a minority. So I guess like if you think it's positive to encourage minorities not disappear soon enough, maybe we should all be supporting more white people having babies. I just like babies are babies. We can all mix together in some way, and yeah, race mix, you're filthy Iraqi race mix, and that kind of stuff. But anyway, I think that's it for now. So with the drawing, as you have seen with the drawing, I was just kind of thinking, like, what if in a better world, in the carbon universe that I'm going to design, there's going to be delivery rooms that are more like airports used to be, where you'd come out and you'd give birth to your kid, and they'd be sort of like an arena, stadium, or meeting area where people would be just waiting, and they'd have a schedule of the kids being born, and then you'd be able to celebrate. You hold your kid up like Rafiki held up Simba, like, look, we have a son, and then people would be in the crowd like, yay, I'm gonna be an uncle. This is awesome. We got more children, and there'd just be people meeting. You could just go there, even if you don't have kids, you don't know anyone having kids. You could just go there as a situation, takes the community, village to raise a kid. You could just go there and just see the joy of other people just bringing in life, and you welcome them into that world that kind of way. I think that's something that would be kind of cool. So that's it for this, and I'll be doing more in this series. That's it for now, guys, gals, and everybody else in between. Goodbye.